Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. As always, we're brought to you by FTX. Links available in the description below. If you want the mobile trading and portfolio tracking, it's there. If you're going to venture into the leveraged products, do so at your own risk. But there is, more specifically, a leveraged trading guide in there that's free. So just go read that, become aware of these instruments, and then decide whether it's for you or not. In these conditions, maybe not. We're going to talk about the liquidations that took place and that took price higher, so that there's a bit of an omen for you. But at the very least, there's some good free resources in there. So go check them out. Sign up with our link if you want to get discounted fees and to support the show. Make sure you're not from a restricted jurisdiction, and make sure you're not an idiot who's going to add to that liquidation data. Thank you to them for supporting the show as ever. And as always, it's just Don and I. You know, we haven't got any podcast guests. Everyone's thinking the same stuff, more or less, and half our normal guests are gone anyway, or they've become macro experts, right? So the field has certainly been culled a little bit, and we're here talking to you with Bitcoin at 20.2k, which is a better price than the price was last time. I've got the monthly chart up, Don. What's cooking? We've got 3.5 days until the close. We've got a bit of a wick on it. You know, what's your take on this kind of at first glance?
I mean, first glance, just looks like we're bearishly retesting the 2017 December highs.
Okay, I'm turning off this video. I've had enough.
And that's just what it looks like. Like we had a close below it. We now have a green candle that is right into that level. Kind of looks like shit, not gonna lie. This is pretty much the worst this can close, if it closes like this. Obviously, not the most important level, just given the fact that I think there's better weekly structure that we have, but it's still like something. So if you close like this, I think that's a good bearish indicator more than anything. But if we can manage to get back above 23 point something K, which is basically the high of July, that make it a whole lot different. Like at that point, it starts looking really good. But if it goes like this, to me, more of like a bearish close than anything. But the monthly is not really that important to me unless we kind of hit 14K. So if you hit 14K, I think that's the area where you just want to do business based on the monthly. Otherwise, the next area to kind of trade like is 34, right? So you have like a good resistance at 34, 35K-ish, and you have a good support at 14K. Everything else is just kind of like a little bit in between.
You're tired of it at this point.
Yes, and I think this 20K thing's just been used too much. But yeah, it looks like a bearish retest to me, just from a quick glance. And
it's okay, we'll rescue the close, Don.
Me, no. I'm gonna become a dad. I'm not gonna try any shenanigans.
I mean, if anything, the monthly time frame is the only time frame you can trade now. This should be your bread and butter. What do you mean? I've also entertained the scenario that this ends up being a similarly nothing burger monthly close. Like, you know how previous month's close was quote unquote bearish, but there was no breakdown, right? Because it closed below the level but didn't go anywhere. Maybe we get a close above the level, but then also don't go anywhere, and we're just stuck in this purgatory. I don't know how likely that is. I think with vol this depressed, I mean, it popped up a little bit obviously, but in general, I don't think we get like that many more monthly candles like this. But as I've repeated in the past, I kind of want to get away from these levels because I've had enough. I've had enough, man. There's no better, more sophisticated way of saying it. And the market did make an effort, right?
Yeah, it did. It's been trying. Like it's a third of a year now, right? Yeah, where we went this level. So Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Some people move their lives quite radically in a third of a year, I've heard. Allegedly.
Who are you talking about?
You know, the weekly time frame I think is where you've got some home cooked FUD, right? That seems to be from your live stream. And you know, this is the difference between us. I watch all of your live streams, you never watch my 15-minute videos, but that's fine. We can talk about it after the call. You've got this weekly cluster of resistance. And I've kind of gone back and forth about this because I'm like, well, is it just too irrelevant now? It's sitting above all these swing highs. The mid-range I was using for a while is using the lowest close from June and the highest close from like August, and that mid-range ended up being closer to pretty much where the last like big swing high formed at 21.8, 22k. So I've kind of gone back and forth on this weekly cluster that you've got. You know how if price is just so range bound, you kind of go insane and you find like a new level every other day. Like no, this is the one. So I feel like I've kind of fallen prey to that just a tiny bit. But as far as, you know, we've got 2.5 days until the weekly close. I still think that's like valid weekly resistance. And that's sort of where the market is slowing down. What would make this weekly close not shit? Because presumably from your system at least, that's resistance. It's above a bunch of these swing highs. It pico tops like at the upper boundary, and it's currently trading below. What's the weekly close or just weekly analysis on that cluster?
I mean, if we manage to get back about 22K before the weekend is done, then that's starting to look good. But right now, it kind of looks like shit, like you said. It's not necessarily too bearish per se. It's at resistance, so you don't want to hold it. I think it's much more interesting above that resistance. And I don't think the support is good anymore. So basically, if you're bullish, you're going to have to pray that this resistance goes. Like you have to break it. And if you're bearish, you're going to have, if you sold into that resistance, you have a pretty neat entry. And you can bet on basically breakdown, just based on the fact that we for once had a little bit of an impulse. And I think it's the last impulse that we're going to give, that we're going to get.
Ever.
No, the last impulse off of this level, because
Right.
I think it's so old, it's so shit now that this is it basically. And yeah, so it's not necessarily too bearish, but it's not bullish. It's definitely not bullish. So we're kind of getting rejected by somewhat decent resistance, and if we can't manage to get above it this week, you'd expect to go lower next week. I wouldn't short, generally speaking, just because 20K seems like a shit level to short. But this is almost as good as it gets for like bearishness, if you want to be. Me personally, I just don't want to be. I'd much rather be a buyer at 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15K than a seller to kind of capture like that 1 or 2 or 3K difference. I think at some point you just kind of have to bet on it going up. I'm not willing to bet on it going up, but I'm definitely not willing to bet on it going down anymore. So for me, this looks like shit. I think I'm going to get better prices, so I'm not buying, basically.
Fair enough. If we go down to the daily time frame, that's sort of where the breakout is most evident. And it's done a thing which I know that you don't like, which is it's come back pretty much straight away, right?
Yes.
So I've seen a few different interpretations on like where is the range high / the breakout. I think if you take even just the most recent swing high, the 4th of October daily candle, and use either the wick or the body there. That's kind of, and if you look at that on the line chart, that's like, actually, just do that, you can see the point made pretty obviously, right? In terms of just like recent market structure, if you look on the daily time frame line chart, it's that 4th of October, 20.3, 20.4 level that sort of stands out as if you're going to have a technical breakout or a shift in market structure, at least in terms of recent price, that seems to be like the swing high to look for, right? Or at least I know this
Yeah.
stuff is subjective, but it's not an unreasonable one to look for if you're looking for shifts. And what the market's done, at least on a daily time frame, is it had a strong day. The first impulse that tested the level, the strong impulse then closed above it, and since then we've just had two, one full daily red candle, and the current one is forming, but it's still currently below the level. Is this a failed breakout? I guess just put bluntly, is there enough evidence to support that this is a failed breakout, or is this like one of those do or die, buy this pullback now, good invalidation type of things? Because I know you're not a big revisitor type of guy when it comes to
Yeah.
these things, but if you had to look at that line chart that I said, for example, is that has enough time passed to give you any bias here?
I mean, like just looking at the daily, right? The obvious trade, I think, is to long this because your invalidation is really clear. Because, like I said, this impulse is, in my opinion, the last one you're going to get from the level. So if we full retrace this impulse, you
Back it
should
up.
be out, right? Yeah, and I mean that basically puts your invalidation at like the low 19Ks. That's a very, very tight invalidation. The target is quite high up, right? So you can target 29K if this breakout sticks. Now, most of the time it's not going to stick, but with like a risk reward setup like this, I think it makes sense. Just from a pure trading perspective, if you're just looking at the daily, I think just the daily in a nutshell, like you just ignore everything else daily. That's like a 7 RR setup. And I think that's gonna play out, I don't know, like a third of the time ish. So that's still like decent. I think it's a decent play. Um, that's kind of what I've been trying to kind of get my head around, because the daily is actually like quite a nice setup. It's just that the weekly looks like shit and the monthly is gonna close as a bearish retest. And as long as that's the case, I cannot take the trade. But on the daily time frame, just on its own, I don't really hate the setup. And the breakout, like I don't really have a range as you do. I have support in the 18 to 19Ks basically, and I have resistance at 22K. And then I have a diagonal that goes from
Oh, that naughty one. Yeah.
that goes from like the June from June lows to the July lows, and then the July lows again, and you kind of draw it through, and it's been very, very accurate. It's actually been pretty nice. That's exactly where price stopped on the move up. So once that goes, it starts to look much, much better, I think. But yeah, right now it's kind of, I look at the daily and I see a trade there, and I look at the weekly and the monthly. I'm like, okay, this is just untradable. So I'm kind of in between. I don't quite know what to do yet, so I'm just gonna chill.
That sounds reasonable.
Mhm.
Lowest time frame I'll drag you to. You might need to add this to your trading view because you don't have it by default. It's the 4 hour actually.
Yes.
And the way I think a reasonable way to look at the range high is, you know, that big sort of liquidation move we had from 22.7 all the way to 20, basically that ugly cluster of just huge red candles from the highs.
Mhm.
If you take basically the first green 4 hour candle that formed in that consolidation, you get it at around 20.3, 20.4, and just if you add 20.4 to your level, you can see that it's really significant, right? You can zoom
Yes.
out even before this kind of BART price action. You could look at the most recent highs. There was also like a mini cluster or consolidation formed there on the way up before this breakout as well, that single 4 hour red candle that took place 2 or 3 days ago. That seems to me to be like quite a reasonable and accurate way to look at where the range high is. And it
Mhm.
seems like we're, at best, this is a deep retest, which supports your kind of max max risk reward type of setup. At worst, it's an intraday sign of a failed breakout, right? Because that level is very clean. I've got it at 23 20s. You can add it as 20.4, whatever. But that's like, 1, 2, 3. And then the fourth test that we've had was the push that hasn't been accepted, and we're currently below it. I think for me, one setup that I like to trade is if you get like a good level, you get a failed breakout attempt and the market's below it. If it then gets a second time above where that failed breakout took place, that tends to be like a long, right? Because it
Yeah.
wasn't accepted above the level the first time. That's bearish. But then if the failed breakout doesn't go anywhere and gets back above where the initial trap took place, that tends to be quite a nice trigger for continuation. I'm not sure if I'd personally target 29. I mean, I get it from a swing basis, but I'm just so scared of holding longs to some extent, and my
Mhm.
volatility expectations are so garbage that I'd probably start scaling earlier. But that to me is at least on the table. It's like there is like at best the evidence between is it a real breakout or a failed breakout. It's mixed. It's like a wash if you're being generous, I think. So if you wait for that type of intraday price action to support that, no, this is just like a deep retest and the market's fine. I think above 20.4-ish, be it daily or intraday, you can at least, that argument becomes supported once again. That's kind of the most I'm willing to do. Like, I'm already uncomfortable with the fact that there wasn't like another 2-3 daily candles of the type that we had, right? Because
Mhm.
if the steel man of the bullish argument is basically that we've been in volatility purgatory. Historically, when prices moved off of these levels, it's offered, 100, 200, 300%, basically like crazy outsized moves. And so if this breakout is going to be like that, then there's really no turning back, looking back, or slow down in momentum. And there's no space for it, right? So the fact that it did slow down indicates that maybe it's just not that type of break. So I'm already uncomfortable with the fact that we didn't just literally teleport to like mid 20s at the very least.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm coping by saying, well, this is like just a deep retest, and maybe if it gets above 20.4, it becomes fine again. But I think that's fair, right? I don't know about you. I was personally surprised that that it didn't keep going. That makes sense. I was like, oh, it's a higher high. It's the first sniff of volatility in a while. This is going to like set off all the momentum traders and algos, etc. And it didn't, right? At the moment, at least, it didn't. And I think we talked about price a lot. But there's also kind of a time-based invalidation on this, in my head at least, where if it doesn't push through this kind of at least through the 20 handle in the next, I don't know, like into the monthly close or early, I mean, even, I want to say early next month, but even that is too late, right? To think about what the daily chart would look like if I give this thing like 4 days and it spends all of that time basically consolidating or chopping below the breakout. That's not a good breakout. no matter how you slice it. So I guess that's similar to you. I kind of have mixed feelings about the magnitude and the speed of this. I think if I had to turn my brain off and just go setup by setup, I could intraday long this above 20.4, 20.5, whatever. But in the absence of that, I just need a bit more evidence to support that it's not a failed breakout. That was a really long, rambly segment, but that kind of tells you where my head is at with this market right now.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think it's just kind of all over the place a little bit. And for me, that's just not worth the trade. But I think, honestly, like the daily setup, I really, really like. These are
Yeah.
usually quite good. It's just, if I take that kind of trade, I have to go against the higher time frames, which always gets me a little bit uncomfortable. But if you're right in those kind of trades and you go against the high time frames and those turn out to be invalidated, then the rewards are usually great because people get this, like they get completely squeezed out. And so that's at least something. I think there's a good argument to be made for taking a bullish trade, even though everything's bearish, basically, just because the setup's so good. I don't really see a good argument for bearishness unless we start losing 19K, like for bearish setups. I understand being bearish, like I said, because the weekly and the monthly look like shit. But I don't really see a trade. The only trade that I can see is the one to the upside, even though, like I said, high time frames disagree.
And it's a useful distinction, right, between just talking about hand waving about direction, like I'm bullish, I'm bearish, and then actually taking a setup with like defined parameters and risk,
Yes.
etc. I think people tend to give too much weight to the latter and not the. Well, no, they tend to give too much weight to people who just say I'm bullish or I'm bearish, and then if price kind of over some time frame ends up in that direction, they look really smart, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the time you can be bullish and not have a setup, or you can be bearish and have a setup, or even you might feel bullish, but you get a bearish setup, and that's the one that pays the bills. You know, it's a very strange thing. You know, we'd encourage our audience to just take a setup-oriented approach more so than I expect number to go up, number go down, and you know that's at least served me quite well. But yeah, I mean I'm just like adding cope lines at this point. We had this old daily range. I don't know if you remember, with like the upper boundary on that first green candle on the nuke from the 15th of June, the lowest close, the classic 19K level, and then you got that mid range just at 20.7, and that's sort of exactly where the market reversed. So maybe that's still in play. But I think the overarching theme across all we've spoken about is basically momentum, right? If the trend is really as weak as bearish as it seems, then these breakouts get stuffed and they get stuffed quickly. They don't get anywhere, right? And if this time is different as far as breakouts and momentum, then it really shouldn't be spending much longer here. Like, not at all. And I'm talking like 1 or 2 days max, in my head at least, for this
Yes.
to not look like a piece of shit. Because as uncomfortable as this is to say, like in a downtrend, and yeah, we're at like 20K, like getting really to cyclical levels, but generally speaking, in a downtrend, you don't buy breakouts, right? Like the likelihood of a breakout breaking out versus a breakout being a trap, it much more skews towards the trap side of the equation. So if you're going to get me to go against that, like I'm going to need really good evidence for it. Which is why my time-based invalidation for it is quite short, and the price-based one I want to see instead of just jumping in. I think that's enough time for BTC. We'll talk about like some periphery stuff that affected it, like Amazon, Netflix, and we'll talk about indices, etc. But purely on BTC technical terms, mid 20K is the area to watch for price action, and it will more or less inform you within a 1 or 2 day time span whether this breakout has any legs and momentum or not. Do you think it's a fair summary?
Yep, it is.
Cool. Let's head on over to ETHland. So again, at face value, oh god, I say that every time. People are memeing me in the comments now, but it's only reinforcing my behavior. I'm just getting psychologically manipulated at this point. In any case, our argument has been that, hey, you know, at the very least, get above previous cycles levels, and that's not asking for a lot, and it should be very doable. And the market's trying, like it's doing a good job. We had 2 daily closes or 3 daily closes at this point above, which is nice. It kind of paused at this. You know how much I hate this 1500s structure, right? That daily resistance block that we've had since forever, but unfortunately it's still working. That consolidation we had in Technical Roundup for a while, so it's kind of hit the first daily structure from that breakout. So on the daily, it's above the prior cycle high and looks like it's reclaimed that very clean flip level, which is nice. On the weekly, I mean, the weekly close is pending, but I mean, unless it gets completely stuffed, it looks like it's going to close above 1420 or 1400 as well. So what do you make of ETH? Is there like for Bitcoin, your FUD was basically monthly might close as a bearish retest, or at the moment it's like an underside retest, and then the weekly was straight into that cluster. Does that translate to ETH at all? What structures are you looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, ETH is doing the same that Bitcoin is doing, just better. Like basically, ETH's been just outperforming again, and yeah, Bitcoin is probably gonna close bearishly, and ETH's probably gonna close like a breakout, which makes the whole situation even more confusing than it already is.
Oh, great.
I think, like, I mean, ETH's just been the better bet, I guess. I still think overall ETH is gonna go up over the next like year or two. I don't know if that's gonna be now or later. That's really hard to say, but does kind of look like it wants to go now, because every other altcoin, right? Almost every other altcoin has been underperforming, and ETH's been outperforming the entire way. So ETH kind of looks okay to me. And if it closes this weekly like it is doing right now, maybe you get like a 14K retest next week, but at that point it starts.
14K.
Not 14K, 1.4K.
Just
It's
a
been a
quick
long
10x,
day.
bros. Chill.
It's been a long day. 1.4K retest actually starts looking quite good at that point. So this is something that I do often when I'm looking for bottoms. I'm looking at Bitcoin and I'm looking at ETH, because sometimes you can tell that Bitcoin is actually a trap, just based on the price action of ETH or the other way around. In this case, ETH actually does show some promise to me anyway. So I think that's an interesting one. It's gonna close above that cycle high, which we've talked about quite a bit, and that's a really, really good first sign. I think that kind of makes me want to believe that this is a higher low. The area that needed to hold did hold so far, so
I guess we're
quite
going to become
nice.
ETH BTC spread traders again, right?
Yeah, and there's a setup for ETH on the weekly as well. So you have like a setup on Bitcoin, right? Just okay, maintain the strength basically, and the same thing is true for ETH,
Yeah.
which will like it's stop loss around the lows that we had around 1.2K, and then you can target, like, even if you want to be tight with your targets, you can target like the underside of 2K, like 1.9 or something, and that's a pretty decent trade setup there. And if you're super, super bullish, obviously you can target higher. But I think like there's a setup to be had here too, like a swing trade setup. I don't dislike it. I don't dislike the bullish Bitcoin setup. I don't dislike the bullish ETH setup. I just wish it was all in line, because if as long as it's not, it's a little bit tough to trade. So because then you want to flip flop, right? When you have bearish indicators on like a couple time frames and a bullish on others, and something goes against you, or even when it goes in your favor, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you're like, holy shit,
I fell for
what
it.
am I doing? Yeah, what am I doing, right? And then you want to just close your position, and it's really hard to hold through stuff when you have conflicting kind of signals. So this one's quite tough, but I don't hate it. I don't hate ETH. I don't hate Bitcoin.
Invalidation, presumably the same, that if these breakouts get stuffed, then
Exactly. Yeah.
goodbye, basically.
1.2K goes, I think you're just going to go to like 800. And I think you're going to go quite quickly too.
One piece of FUD that I got messaged this morning, and I say it's FUD, it's just like fractal stuff. It was based around the 6K breakdown, because of course it was, right? Like, where else are we going to get our analogs at this point? But it was looking at the sort of later weeks or towards the end of that consolidation. You know, the 15th of October 2018 candle, which ended up being like a green spike on BTC, and that closed somewhere in the middle, right? It was like, it
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
like so basically it looked like it wanted to break out, spike the highs, vol vanished, and then you got the breakdown, right?
Yeah, that was basically Tether FUD,
I
if I
remember
remember
that. I
correctly.
think
Yeah.
so. I think so.
Pretty sure like people were like afraid that Tether was going to zero, so they bought Bitcoin with it, which is hilarious.
There's a use case for you.
Mhm.
But that's sort of the argument. You know, one person messaged me this argument that, what if it's just a similar type of weekly spike, and then you do get vol expansion, just not in the direction that you thought. If you get the
That's
type of weekly close that, any more weakness basically from here, do you start to entertain that argument that this is just a weekly spike and then the acceleration comes, just not in the direction we'd like it to come?
That's basically why I said if we lose these lows that we set before this impulse, we're gonna go to near zero prices, just based on like how these things have moved before. So yeah, if we lose the lows, I think it could be the exact same thing again. Now, obviously, don't have to. And when you have this kind of invalidation, right? If you bought 6K over and over and over again, made some money every time, and then you get out the moment we lost like 6K, basically, you took a haircut, but you made a bunch of money along the way, and you get to buy 3K. That's pretty nice, right? And it's the same thing here, where you could technically like trade this over and over and over again with a tight invalidation, and at some point you're going to be wrong, but especially in this case, the invalidation is so close that I think it's somewhat okay for a trade.
So give the breakout a chance, and if it's wrong, don't worry, because you'll get 50% discounts anyway.
That's how it feels like to
Nice.
me anyway.
I
I
like
could be
that.
wrong on that, obviously, and I'm like full disclosure, I'm not taking any trades right now, right? So it's not like I'm taking this trade, but if I was still active trading like on BitMEX or whatever, how I used to do, all day, every day, 24 hours a day,
Taking my grind set.
that would be exactly what I would be looking for. Kind of like retrace this impulse to the upside, and it's a clear short setup because you're gonna kind of fuck over a lot of people, and unless that happens, you can kind of guess that it's gonna go to the upside. I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's not the worst.
I mean, it's like the first bit of volatility we've had in a while, right? You'd be forgiven for giving it a chance, basically. Also, it's funny. I started writing this article. I got like a couple hundred words through, like 10, 15 minutes or whatever, and it was about breakout trading, right? Because I think we've talked about this before, either on air or off air. But the basic idea is, in like, especially in bear market, like price action maxi circles, breakout trading has a terrible reputation, right? It's like, oh, look, you're the exit liquidity, the SFP, lol, trying to force a breakout. I've got my footprint that shows that you got absorbed and all this other shit, right? And it just gives breakout trading a really bad name. Whereas realistically, like in crypto, it's if the conditions are aligned, you'd be an idiot for not breakout trading, right?
Yes.
Because like all these big impulses, all the big trend forming moves, all the big trend continuation moves, they're breakouts. And a lot of the time, they don't give you the type of retest that you want to see in order to get in. And even by the time it does get to your retest levels, like the trend is over anyway. So I kind of wanted to write this. Well, I'm going to write this article, like a quick sort of apologetic on breakout trading and sort of how, you know, if you get the context aligned, it's not a bad strategy. The upsides that it gives you, like clear targets generally, and also gives you very clear invalidation, which is a good bonus. Price-wise, time-wise, etc. But then the market started to break out, and I was like, oh shit, if I publish this article now, I look like some sort of like sub-tweeting engagement monkey, you know? It's like the market's breaking out, and I'm writing an article about breakout trading. And then I'm like, well, what if it goes wrong? And then people are going to say, oh, you look, lol, you wrote this article on breakout trading when the market broke out, and then it went to zero. Such an idiot. But then obviously if the market then goes up, and I write the article about breakout trading, it's going to be like, oh, hindsight genius type of thing. So basically, I'm never writing this article. Fuck all of you. I'm gonna write it at some point. I just thought it was funny to. I think it's useful. I really think it's useful because it's easy to get caught up in this price action echo chamber where like everything is a deviation, failed breakout, footprint absorption, SFP, mean reversion mode. But if you don't have a breakout trading setup in your toolbox as a crypto trader, like what the fuck are you doing? You know. So I'll get around to it eventually when it's less politically sensitive. Put it that way. Speaking of breaks, I've got Solana weekly. And it's sort of retesting the underside of the weekly range low that we fudded and talked about at around 30.5. So I'm talking about the lowest weekly close after like 17 weeks down from the 6th of June 2022. And that looks like, you know, we had a weekly close there. We had a bounce. The last week closed below and kind of tested the underside. And now we're sort of poking into the same area. And I think we talked about on Weekly Open that kind of a failed breakdown somewhere would be nice, or the momentum setup you talked about would be nice, but as long as the market's not printing either, you can kind of chill. Does this look like a reclaim type of setup forming sort of before our eyes as I look on the daily chart. You know, what do you think of this? Is there enough evidence to support that type of failed breakdown structure that we talked about around the 30 handle for Sol?
I
Or
mean,
is this like entirely Bitcoin dependent? And then you look like a genius if Bitcoin goes up, like, haha, reclaim. And then if it goes down, you look like an idiot because you like bought the underside of resistance. Because that's kind of where I want to go with it.
yeah, I think that's very fair. It's mostly Bitcoin reliant. To be honest, like looking at this, it looks like a weak range to me. You've had a test of range low back when I bought it in June. Then you had another test of that same area roughly in August, and now you've got the third test, right? And I think unless you get a close back above the lows that you kind of outlined just now, so like what is it, 30.5k,
Yeah.
and not 30, not k, 30.5.
These are your future Solana
Jesus
targets.
Christ.
Heard it here first. Solana to 30k.
But yeah, 30.5. Like if we start closing above there, it starts looking a little bit better. But I'm not really the biggest fan, and I think in general, if you think that Bitcoin is gonna carry over into Solana, I could see Solana Bitcoin go down anyway. If Bitcoin really shows strength, I could see Solana underperform. I could see a lot of stuff underperform. So I'm not the biggest fan. It's not the worst setup. If we start if we close this week above significantly above 30.5, I think there's a trade to be had there. Same kind of story with Bitcoin. Stop at the lows, target range high. It's not the worst. It's a good setup. If you want to trade altcoins, I think that's one of the ones that is actually just like a decent setup. A lot of the other ones just completely look like garbage. This is at least something. Doesn't look good, but it's a setup.
That's a very cred trade idea put out there. Like, if Solana closes above 30,000, I will be long. But until then, I'm going to wait. I mean, look, since we started recording, Bitcoin's been going up. So we should clearly do a 24-hour live stream. We'll be back at 60k in no time. You know?
Oh, God, I would die.
That's how things work. And it's looking better. You know, famous last words. Could just be a test of the top side of the range. But again, above 20.4, 20.5, whatever, it starts to look less Barty, I think.
Yeah.
So let's look at the indices, because this is the monthly close is pretty much here for them, right?
Yes.
And there was some, basically, we'll cover the news. There was some economic news coming out and a bunch of new acronyms that no one cares about and but seemingly matter now. And it was all in line with expectations for the most part. So yes. Nothing too crazy on the macro front. If we look at the monthly S&P 500, it looks like if it closes like this, technically speaking, it will have closed above resistance, right? Above the 3760 handle or whatever. Is that all that matters? Like, if you look at it on the weekly structure or daily, etc., like, is it as simple as all these monthly breakdowns have had follow through? If it monthly closes above the the monthly cluster, then we're sort of risk on back in business for next month, or at the very least, not like meltdown type of mode.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that if we close like this, we're gonna still have a little bit of a down month next month, but I would generally look for upside. Right. In this kind of scenario. So yeah, if we close above resistance, I think the monthly's been really, really good. Doesn't make much sense to counter trade it.
Throw it out the window now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been working wonders all the way down. This is basically like, it's been a bearish retest. That's what I've been assuming anyway. And it's trading just a tiny, tiny bit above it. So switching stance after it's trading 1% above where you thought it was a bearish retest, it's kind of nice. Like if you get that position, that's kind of sweet. So for me, that's what I'm looking for. Close this, and I mean, there's only a few hours left to go. Close this nicely, and then maybe we have a little bit of a nothing burger next month, and then I think we could maybe go back to 4.1.
Yeah, like the midpoint between 4.3 and 3.7 or whatever, right? That seems in my head, that target makes a lot of sense, and that is at like 4K, 4.4050, whatever. Maybe it goes back to range high, who knows? But look, it'd be the first good high time frame sign in this market, right?
Agreed.
Does the weekly add any color to that? Because, you know, there's some wicks going on. The last weekly close was like right at the boundary of the upper sort of bit of monthly resistance. Now this week is poking above. There's some like dodgy candle structure at the 3900 level. Nothing I'm like terribly in love with. I mean, some of it is okay, but it's not the monthly levels, put it that way. Is there any way that the weekly time frame could change your mind about the monthly close, I guess is one way to put that.
Not really, no. I mean, in general, the monthly's just been so clean and the weekly's been a little bit choppy. So I don't think it makes much sense. If you look at the quarterly, it's a little bit interesting, I think, because then
Ooh,
you
spicy.
have, yeah, you have very clear, like this looks like a market cycle cheat sheet basically to me, where you have just like the run up and then you have the top, and now we're gonna go for like some sort of bottom for like a lower high ish. Like that's what this chart looks like to me, especially when you turn off log chart. Just kind of looks like some of the cryptos look like before they have like a shitty time. Don't think that the cheat sheet is necessarily going to play out, which takes this quite low. But I think looking for this lower high anywhere here makes a lot of sense on the quarterly chart. So I think you have really really good support at 3.2, and then the lower high could come in anywhere from 4.2 to 4.4 ish, and that'd be kind of nice. Like there'd be a lot to trade in that time where we bottom out and then have a quite big bounce to a lower high, before it kind of starts ranging. I don't think it would necessarily do the whole cheat sheet, bleed the entire gains out, but I could see it just range for a while, for like a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, chill.
Yeah, I mean it's been up only and it's been very aggressively so. So I don't think anything should surprise anyone at this point. Like I think you would take any rally as a bear market rally from now on, and then expect range more than anything. I don't think we go back to the regime of okay, all-time high after all-time high after all-time high. And I think it's the same for crypto, really,
I'm just
which
gonna
is
ignore the
depressing.
parts that I don't like. So, thanks for your opinion. No, I mean, I guess it depends what kind of regime we enter, right? Like, if we actually do get like a prolonged, like inflation state, like it comes down but it stays high, and we get a stagflationary type of thing, and then you actually get deflation, which will fuck a lot of growth in just in the opposite direction type. But there are a lot of scenarios where, and also I think people expecting stuff to go back to 2021 is that's a crazy expectation to set, because that was like a proper consecutive black swan type of mania with very unique ingredients. I think if that's your base case, like, okay, well, that's what a bull market is, and anything other than that isn't good enough. I don't know. it might be a little bit until we reach similar levels of monkey JPEGs taking over the world, Rolling Stones, hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever, right? That might
Yeah.
need some reworking conceptually. I'm guessing Nasdaq isn't terribly interesting. I mean, it looks worse. I'm not surprised given it's more sort of growth oriented. It's getting hammered harder. That might be a kind of nail-biting monthly close. I don't know what you think about that. Obviously, the S&P matters more, generally speaking. But we've had windows where our correlation, like the argument being that even though we've gone through periods where our correlation with the Nasdaq has been higher when it comes to crypto, it's just kind of like a higher beta S&P. So really, you get your signals from S&P and
Yeah.
extrapolate them to Nasdaq if you like. But that's a bit of a nail biter monthly close, right? It's sort of found resistance again right at the midpoint when a lot of these growth companies were getting hammered on earnings, and it's sort of back at the range low at 11.1 again. Which is where it's sort of that's where it's bouncing from now, which is nice. So the market's still like pretty technical, but yeah. With anything on the Nasdaq, like if you got conflicting signals, for example, like S&P closes above and Nasdaq closes below, would that change your view, or is that just like the classic conflict? Like, fuck it, I'll just look at other time frames and see what the market's like if they're
Yeah,
not aligned.
I'll personally just look at the S&P. If I mean it's nice when you have the confidence, but I don't really care too much
Yeah.
on the Nasdaq front. But it's been kind of cool. Like it's also been trading somewhat nice, just not as nice as the S&P,
Yeah.
which makes me just think like, why would I be trading the Nasdaq if I can be trading the S&P?
So basically, your tunnel vision on S&P monthly.
Yeah,
Okay. I think it's pretty reasonable.
yeah.
Well, the market knows what to do to to put in a good print. It better get to work. Anything else? I mean, we can get into the news and headlining type of stuff. I think it's a pretty decent
Yes.
overview of the charts. I think everyone's looking at the same stuff anyway. Like, is this a BART breakout or a real one? Right. That's kind of it.
The big question. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Big week. So as far as the content stuff goes, the first bit is Musk at last takes over Twitter, and he's updated his bio to Chief Twit, which is funny because twit is an insult in British slang. I don't know if he knows that, probably, but whatever. I still found that funny. You call someone a twit, they're sort of like an idiot. I don't know if his ego allows him to be self-deprecating, so maybe it's unintentional. But I found that funny anyway. So yeah, this is a thing. Look, at this point, I really don't care as long as the platform becomes usable. You know, I don't feel like it's asking for a lot. Right now, part of the reason I haven't been like tweeting any of this action or my views is because as soon as I tweet something, there are literally 50 bot spam replies within 8 seconds, and the whole thing just becomes garbage for me to deal with. And my, people trying to read the tweets, see all these comments, it's just pure garbage. And yeah, there's actually like a risk of harm there because those people are trying to scam and give links, and someone who's new might not know that. I just don't like it. So as much, as far as my mixed feelings about Elon in general go, like, look, man, if you're gonna buy this platform, it doesn't seem incredibly difficult to fix this type of thing, or at least make it much better than it is. And I'm also tired of how we've just put up with it. The crypto spam bots have been a thing pretty much since like 2017,
Yep.
and they've only gotten worse, despite crypto Twitter or on Twitter being one of the fastest growing sectors. Right? It's like, did you see that thing? It was like crypto and it was like porn. I'm like, I'm not surprised at all. That Venn diagram has a lot of overlap, but like,
Yeah.
if we're the so-called power users in the fastest growing sector, can you at least let us use the platform without getting, like, just literally make it usable? So I know it's a bit of a boring take, but like, ownership, it is what it is. I'll have to judge him by his actions. But as far as making the platform usable, that's a very easy way to win me over. It doesn't seem like a terribly high bar either.
Yes. I mean, I know that I'm gonna get banned eventually, but
You're gonna martyr yourself for the cause.
yes. But I think, yeah, if he can make the spam bots go away, he'll have my vote anyway. I don't like the guy. People seem to hate me for it, which is really odd because I'm just like whatever. But yeah, if he gets the spam bots away, that's just gonna be good news for everyone. In terms of if this is a good deal or not, I lean towards like it's probably a really shit deal, honestly, for him. But it's not really my expertise. I'm down to just have him fix this mess if he can, and if he cannot, at least he'll shut up about it, which is like a win-win in my eyes.
It depends on like the whole thing of whether it's a good deal for him or not. Like, is buying it right now at that price overpriced? Yes, 100%, right?
Yes.
But if you take on his vision of what he's trying to build, like the X app and like a WeChat version, in the West, basically, then that vision is much grander than any valuation Twitter has now as like a social platform, right? But that's a
Yeah.
completely different thing. So if you want to go down that way, I mean, maybe I'm sure crypto people will turn on him because of the privacy implications. I can see that becoming a thing.
Hmm.
But good on him. Just fix the damn platform, and that's like an easy, low-hanging fruit bribe. Speaking of large tech companies, Meta's stock sinks 20% as metaverse spending spree continues. I think Facebook or Meta is down like 70-something% from its highs, like literal sort of Bitcoin, ETH, shitcoin level type of market cycle correction. And
Yep.
yeah, this is literally trading like a shitcoin, you know. Um, I don't know what you think of this in general. I've seen some of the criticism that like Zucker's an idiot for going like all in on the metaverse, and it's like too early, and the stock price reflects that, so on and so forth. I kind of like it, I think he sort of realizes as far as social functions go, Instagram and sort of WhatsApp do a fantastic job in their relative fields, and then it's like he's trying to move on from just the sort of race, the rat race of becoming just like a trying to stay relevant MySpace sort of social media company, and trying to sort of foresee the future and go into a completely another direction as to how we're going to interface and interact more generally. And this is like a 5, 10, 20-year vision, right? So the fact
Yes.
that this pivot, which happened at a terrible time for speculation and growth and markets more generally, is getting hammered, I don't think that necessarily reflects the strategy that he's undertaken. I don't know, man. I gotta respect when really rich, successful, and like very entrenched, embedded hegemons like take a risk like that, and try to
Yeah.
pivot and like put their balls on the line, despite having like a relatively safe product. Like you got to respect it. And again, this is like we judge it on its current price and that type of stuff. But this whole metaverse thing, it's like a 5-10 year vision at least, right? So I think the jury's out. It's too early to judge. I think. I don't know. That was
Well,
quite rambly, but like it's just like I like the idea of him taking a risk on this type of stuff. And if he's right,
mhm,
the payoff is going to be extraordinary, right? Because he'll be
mhm.
5, 10, 20 years ahead of all of the large tech companies as far as like metaverse goes, and that's like a complete monopoly home run there. So I mean, I get it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's actually like Meta is actually starting to become into it's starting to move into a range where it's interesting because I definitely wouldn't have bought it at 300, 400. Now that it's trading almost below 100, it kind of seems like a cool play at some point. Like, I don't
Right?
know if I want to have it at 100 or if it's going to be at 70, but in this range somewhere, it's trading all the way back to like 2015 levels, which is really interesting, right? This is 7 years just wiped the fuck out. I find it interesting.
That chart,
So
just like, have you seen the monthly chart, the
yeah, I
quarterly
have the
chart there?
monthly open right now.
Man.
It broke 130, which was the support to hold. But I think if it kind of manages to get back above there, it starts looking really, really good. And I actually like if it goes to 70 or something, I'll probably buy some. Just makes sense. I think the guy's been a business genius ever since he's showed up. Basically, I mean, every time he's bought something, I've been like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" This seems like it's already topped, and then it just started. Basically, it's the same with Instagram. It's the same with WhatsApp. It's like back then, everyone was like, "Okay, this are some stupid decisions," and they've worked out flawlessly, right? So I wouldn't want to fade the guy, and I want to get some of the pie at some point. Not entirely sure. Like I'm starting. I never had any interest in buying Meta or like Facebook. I'm starting to get some interest, like
Yeah,
just from a okay. I'm looking at this chart and this seems like quite a drop.
something's
And
broken.
yeah, it's basically like how I would trade Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin goes from 20 to 3K, there's a trade there. I can just smell it. And the same thing is true in this one. I think there's a trade there. I'd be very, very shocked if there's not. Um, so yeah, I'm actually gonna look into this a little bit
Yeah.
because it seems kind of cool.
Same. I agree. And also, this is going to sound controversial to like crypto natives, but like, if you want broad brush exposure to the idea of a metaverse, this probably isn't the worst way to express it. You know, instead of buying just like garbage governance tokens that don't mean anything, or some NFT project which has metaverse in 2024 as their roadmap if they haven't slow rugged by then, why don't you just buy fucking Meta? You know, like the guy's going all in on this thing. It completely nuked and cratered, and you know looks like it's going to zero, which generally, if you like the thing, is is a good place to buy.
Yep.
You know, as far as your options go for like metaverse exposure, the list isn't very good, right? Like as far as
Mhm.
tokens go or companies or whatever. I mean, unless you're doing VC investor seed stuff, but you know, presumably neither we nor our audience has access to that in any great capacity. This isn't a bad way to express that view of the future, I think. Eventually, again, 90, 70, whatever, like it can do whatever it needs to in the short term, but like structurally speaking, if you have like some sort of metaverse multi-year thesis, like I don't think meta is going to be a particularly bad way of expressing that view. So
Mhm.
watch this space as far as meta goes. Pantera Capital's early stage token fund is down 71% this year. They also charge a 33% management fee with 30% performance fee, which is crazy, right? Because 2 and 20 is seen as in the TradFi world as sort of standard, but even then it's like a bit rich. And this is 3 and 30, which is impressive. But yeah, I just brought this up to kind of goes to show now, like in all sorts of corrections, not being liquid sucks, but it's sort of the price you inherently sort of calculate and pay when you're dealing with venture and illiquid stuff. But like the way this market cycle has unfolded specifically, like the whole thing has been about liquidity, right? So like if you don't have that, it's been like particularly rough, and it shows that Andreessen Horowitz is down 40% as well. Having raised a total of 7.6 billion to deploy into crypto and Web3 startups. Like, mate, can you just buy some Bitcoin and ETH? Do you know what I mean? Like, just do us a favor. And with leverage, you can get a lot of Bitcoin and ETH with 7.6 billion. You know, it's like put that money to work in secondary markets. But obviously, they would never, right? They just don't give a shit
Yes.
in that capacity. But yeah, I think this is just like a nice little rare window into how the illiquid / VC stuff is doing. And as expected, it's not great. I think Bloomberg also has some like venture capital index, which is down like 70% and back to COVID levels. So it's definitely been round trippy, to say the least, in a lot of these venture, illiquid, investment growth sectors of the investment world. And this is the funny thing. It's like it basically follows market cycles to some extent, because it says even though Pantera's token fund is in a tough spot this year, it still returned 372% to investors since its inception. I mean, that sounds good, but if you consider like, you know, the inception point and then Bitcoin versus ETH, you know, it's like or Solana even kind of becomes in context a bit less impressive. But it's literally just like the fund had an even tougher year in 2018 when it fell 83% before rebounding 562% in 2020 and 319% in 2021. So it's kind of just like following the market essentially, except you're not liquid and you're going to underperform some of the names in secondary markets which are liquid. Bit strange.
Yes.
Bit strange. Not
Doesn't
strange. I mean,
sound
this is
too
how the
great.
industry works, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I just think like that there are certain points in the market cycle where venture just seems like free money, and you kind of spray and pray and make a killing. Like the whole like Alameda, CMS, Sino Global Capital starter pack memes that Hasaka was posting, and you do get those points in the market cycle where any venture deal you can get your hands on ends up being free money, especially if you're well connected enough. But not always the case. I think it's nice to have at least some counterbalancing examples.
Yeah, agree. I mean, honestly, in general, like if you're moving in crypto, stay away from anything that isn't just Bitcoin and ETH long term. Like I never understood these moves into like any funds to kind of just pile your money in. There's better ways. Like as a normie, not obviously there's some reason why you want to get into these funds if you're not a normie. But for anyone that's listening to this anyway, I don't really see the point.
Fine, my ICAs will come back.
Just
They've just been building for 4 years, okay? Any serious startup takes that long. Come on, be fair. This is like an interim article. There are two final interesting pieces, but this one isn't. And it was from the block. It says market movers, : Bitcoin regains 20,000% as Ether soars 15%. The only reason I bring this up isn't to talk about price. I bring it up because anyone who says Ether shouldn't be trusted ever on any topic, right? You either say Ethereum or you say ETH. Anyone who says Ether is like a federal agent or something. I just have a fundamental distrust of people who say Ether. I don't know what you think.
No, I agree, actually. It's the worst.
How to spot a scammer. Like, step one, they say Ether instead of ETH or Ethereum. I have nothing else to add there, just a bit of a comedy interjection. And, the article talks about liquidations and stuff like that, which has been a large part of the move.
Yes.
I think you'll enjoy this because I did. It says Reddit avoids crypto lingo, shows how to take NFTs mainstream. Have you been following this thread at all?
I have, yes.
So basically, for our audience, the basic premise, and correct me if I'm wrong, Reddit introduced these like avatar collectibles for the website that you can sort of buy, trade, whatever, and you've got digital wallets and like the whole thing. The sales are really high. You can get some for free, and others are rare. And it's basically like an NFT for Reddit, right? That's what it is. It's NFTs, and they're collectible avatars, and people fucking love them. They're really popular, they're getting off really well, and there's a ton of mental gymnastics going on, because you have to realize there's sort of a lot of those participants, especially ones in the gaming world, they've sort of trapped themselves, because they've always said that NFTs are a big scam, it's a money grab, it's money laundering, it's wash trading, you don't own the NFT, and all these like standard objections. But then you just rename it into something else and make it really easy to integrate and speculate. And suddenly, oh no, these are different. These are like collectibles and they have utility. That's another one I saw. And so that's been quite curious to follow. I mean, for me, this is actually quite bullish because it shows that even people who like deplore NFTs on like a molecular level or like on a cellular level, that even they can be converted if you, I guess, give them a bit of money and call it something else. Like you give them the financial incentive and then you give them plausible deniability, and the same dopamine gambling receptors that got us hooked, they seem to be pretty universal.
You just have to give them something for free, basically.
It's like that's what your dignity and convictions were worth.
Yep. And then the moment the number goes up, they're hooked. It's the same for everyone, really. Like this is the biggest casino on the planet for a reason. I think like this whole stock market thing, and the same in crypto. I think especially in crypto, it's perfect for gambling, right? And you can get anyone hooked on gambling because it's super fun. And the Reddit people seem to have found their calling now, which is so hilarious.
It's just so cynical when you like die on the hill that this is like a disgusting industry with nothing to do with it, and then you just put like a thin veil over it, and then that's it. That was enough to get it through. Like how principled were your objections if this is all it takes? You give it a different name, you set up the wallet, and you can let people buy it with USD or whatever, and that's it. All the objections disappear. It's crazy. But also very bullish, if you can convert the diehard people with like zero effort, basically, that's quite good for, kind of a moat into crypto, I think.
Yep.
Hilarious. I just found this so funny. I really thought there'd be a lot more principled than this, but I guess once the dollar signs show up, these things change quite quickly. So that was entertaining. This is our last story to finish off on the NFT thing. OpenSea employee loses motion to strike the term insider trading from his case. This is Nate Chastain guy. So again, for audience who may not be aware, he was I think one of the product managers at OpenSea, and he basically had an insight into which collections would be on the front page, and he would use that information, that material information, to basically trade those collections before they got featured. And he made like 20 ETH or something, right?
If that, yeah.
So he made like a pittance compared to presumably his salary and the valuation of his OpenSea equity. And also, this is like in the peak of the bull market for NFTs. So in terms of just like ways to earn money, this is one of the dumbest, most dumbfounding decisions ever, right? And the reason I picked this story out is because, the article writes about like an FBI search and raid of his home. And can you imagine, just from one day, you're like, oh, I know what pictures are going to come up on the front page of this website. I'm going to buy a few of them and make a few ETH. And then the next, you blink and your house is being raided by the FBI. You're getting like sued, insider trading, wire fraud, all this type of stuff. I mean, it must be one of the biggest fumbles and sort of spiraling cascades of terrible decision making that we've seen as far as sort of public figures. I mean, this is so crazy to me.
Definitely agree. That's like so embarrassing. I mean, must be like the money that he made is a tiny portion of what he must have made every month. At OpenSea, and then in general, just the position that he threw away. It's just insane. Completely.
Not to mention his equity, right? Like, and things, the connections you have if you really want to go to get another job. I mean, it's insane. But for me, it's really the contrast between insider trading a few pictures and then your house is getting raided by the FBI. Like unreal. So sorry, Nate. Good luck, I guess, or something. The last one isn't really a story. It's just that October EU harmonized CPI in Italy rose 4% month on month, whereas the estimate was 1.4%. And then 12.8% CPI increase year on year when the estimate was 9.9%. So Europe is running hot, man. Europe is running really hot. Nothing really else to add there. Just the kind of macro picture. The whole pivot, not pivot walk. I'm so lost, not lost in the weeds. I just find it very cumbersome at this point. It's like, the treasury market is going to break, the Fed's going to pivot, and then they don't. But then it's like, the Fed whisperer, or Nicky Leaks, which is a really funny name for that journalist who gets all the Wall Street, the Fed speak from the Wall Street Journal. He posted an article at the end of last week. We talked about it briefly about like potentially being a pivot after the upcoming FOMC, and the market rallies off the top of that. And then he walks it back this morning and introduces this new data point saying if it's hot, we're fucked, but then it's in line with expectations. And so maybe he's sort of walking back the pivot of the pivot. And I'm like, man, this is so tiresome at this point. Especially when candlestick make boing works so well, or has been at the moment as far as equities go. I know I've said this before, but I'm really starting to feel the personally at least the kind of macro fatigue when it comes to following these headlines. The fact that it's like throwing in new indicators every single day or every single week, and the market's just so hungry and horny for a pivot. Any narrative could mean anything at this point. So we're obviously going to follow it, and the big stuff I think is still important, like specifically FOMC and CPI. Those two matter a lot. But I just feel like, given it's kind of been the crypto volatility outside of that basically has been non-existent. So I can understand why people have been leaning more towards digging deeper as far as macro stuff goes. I just think the signal to noise ratio there is pretty appalling at this point.
Yeah.
But what choice do we have? If that's the only vector for volatility, you kind of got to follow it, right?
Yes. It's kind of depressing, but it is what it is. I mean, it's just bear market. It's just how it goes. Bear markets have shit PA. This one's no different. So yeah.
Also, Meta's above 100 now. You clearly missed the generational bottom.
Oh, I've actually been on my second monitor looking, trying to buy it.
Good to know you're engaged.
I am engaged in the market.
Engaged in buying, yeah. I mean, stuff is bouncing, right? This is good. The S&P has found support at that monthly cluster, and it's sort of back towards the highs at 38s. Bitcoin's up over 1%. poking above that range high at 20.5 now. So, I mean, it's sort of improved over the course of this call, which is nice. As I said, 24-hour live stream, and we'll be back to all-time highs in no time.
I'm not ready yet. Not ready yet for all-time highs. Give me a little bit more.
Give me a few years.
Yeah, I need to relax and get this whole thing sorted. My life, basically. So
for our audience who only watches Casual Friday, first of all, what are you doing? Monday Markets is great. Don's live streams are great. The newsletter, go read all of that stuff and watch it. But you did announce on Twitter about upcoming fatherhood, right?
Yes.
In this somewhat dystopian thread that tracks a pseudonymous technical analysis crypto trading duck from the first date skydiving to the announcement of a pregnancy, which is something you should like archive those tweets or something, because what will push you over the edge and cause you to lose your mind is trying to like explain that to a normal person.
I mean, you cannot.
You cannot.
It's just like the worst is the timeline. It's 4 months basically. I think in between the first and the last post, there's 4 months or something.
4 months.
So
that's how long it takes me to put a trade on. Like,
this is how long this consolidation has gone. I went from first date to getting a child, I guess.
Yeah, that's yeah. If you want the vol expectations, it's the DonAlt dating index, the DDI, and much more useful than a lot of other indicators. I think that was a comment that was brought up, right? Look at the personal stuff. Let's face it, people want to hear more about that than anything else. It's always how it's been with engagement or whatever else. A couple of our fellow community members, put that way, are like, oh my god, lol, retard, it's too quick to go in 4 months from first date to having a kid. What are you doing, lol? You're getting played, etc., etc. What's your, not rebuttal, but as far as timeline and speed, etc. concerned, there are kind of face value, lol, I have to say that phrase all the time, but face value kind of, not criticisms, but skepticism that comes with such an accelerated timeline. And you're someone especially who's like generally very stoic and slow and reserved and all this, etc. So why, I guess? What's the missing piece of information as far as you know, Bitcoin's been ranging for longer than this relationship, and there's a baby on the way. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I mean, the thing is, first of all, right, it's a really stupid comment to make, because if you're like,
fuck you, it's my show as well.
No. I mean, like, like when you're like criticizing someone for having a baby, basically, and because the thing's already done, right? It's not like I can reverse it. Not that I want to, but I mean, it's not like I can reverse it. So the comment in itself is quite stupid.
I'm trying so hard not to make so many appropriate jokes about reversing it, but yes.
Oh man, my girlfriend's gonna kill you if you do.
Even I have lines.
Yes, but no, I mean, it's just been different, I guess. I mean, I think you can tell in general, like when something's very serious and when something's just serious and when something's just for fun. Had enough of that. I mean, you're the one that had to suffer through my stories for the last 2 years. Had enough of like casual, had enough of serious, but really not that serious. And when you can feel it, you can feel it, I guess. So, I mean, yeah, it's not this really like it was. Yeah, this time it's different. It wasn't really planned anyway. We talked about children, but we didn't really plan to have them so fast. But then we're like, okay, that wouldn't really make sense to end the pregnancy there and then have children in a year or two. Like, sure. That seems quite stupid. So we just went with it, and I'm happy. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why people take such a big issue with it. There's a lot of people that have done the same.
Because the market
sucks, man. I guess so. There's nothing else to be worried about. But no, I'm fine. She's fine. We're both happy. And I mean, life's short, right? Gotta take it.
I mean, that's a plausible theory, but we all know the real answer is you admire Elon Musk so much. Yes. Given he's your personal hero and his position on repopulating the world and falling birth rates, you decided to take things into your own hands. Or I guess the reason she's pregnant is you didn't take things into your own hands, technically speaking.
Jesus Christ.
But you know.
Listen, I mean, Elon Musk posted that. Like, he wants to kind of make sure that the world is populated. He's owning Twitter now, so I really want to get verified, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I knocked up my girlfriend to get a blue check mark. Please.
Elon, please.
Yeah, the day you ask Elon for anything, I'll know something's gone terribly wrong.
Oh yeah, then it's not me on my Twitter account anymore. It's someone else.
Oh, good stuff. we should wrap up. I haven't got anything
Yep.
else to say. I mean, the market looks better than it did when we started, and I hope
Oh,
those
yeah.
aren't famous last words. But if Don's trying to buy Meta, then something's afoot. Thank you again to FTX for supporting the show. Links available in the description below. Sign up to support the show and get discounted fees, or at the very least, read our free leverage trading guide to get a better understanding of the main instruments that drive price discovery in crypto, which I think is true for perpetual swaps. That's all from us. Like the video. We do look at that number, and it makes us very happy or very sad. My entire emotional state is based on that number, to be honest. So, you've got a lot of responsibility in your hands. Like, subscribe, all normal YouTube stuff. Have an excellent weekend, and we'll see you next week for the usual course of events. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.